Alan, we've got to do an intro, dude.
Yeah, we'll get to that, bro.
I told you this. We've got to plan it and...
Yeah.
Where are we?
I've already planned it.
What are we doing?
We're picking up the car.
Whose car?
Scott's car.
Who's Scott?
My mate.
Yeah, I know who Scott is, but the people don't.
He's my mate. I've known him for 40 years.
Yeah, well...
That's why I'm breaking into his house and taking his car.
What car is it?
You can do that when you've known people for 40 years. Go around the side. Welcome back to the Skid Factory, where today we're introducing our donor car for the 304 V8 build.
Man, this thing's sick, eh? How's that?
Comes with a free surfboard.
Can I take that?
No.
What
Mine.
is it? It's old Egan, bro. Sick.
Hopefully it starts, otherwise we've got a long walk. Hang on. It's got like a carby. Remember those things?
No.
I'll back it out, we'll have a look. Jump in, let's go.
Oh, man.
Better go before the bloody neighbours call the cops.
Bench seat. This thing's sick.
Power steering.
No power steer?
No. It's on the list. This is a 1974 HJ Holden station wagon.
What is it with HJs all of a sudden?
I don't know. They all just seem to have popped up lately. It's a Kingswood. So they have Kingswoods in America, but they're bigger than this. This is based on a GM A-body chassis. So it's not a real big car by American standards, but still big enough to house a decent V8. This actually came out as optional. You could buy this car with a 308 Holden V8 in it.
That's like, yeah.
Which is
earlier version of 304?
Yeah, it's the grandpa of the VT 304. So fitting it's not going to be difficult. Look, there's a Hatsu.
You see them everywhere now, right?
So fitting the engine up and the transmission isn't going to be difficult. We've got the tough mounts and that sort of thing. They basically just drop in. The sump's all set up for it. That's why we changed the sump from the front sump for the Commodore chassis to the rear sump.
A few people definitely caught on what.
Yeah, I think anyone who knows their way around an old Holden would have picked up on that pretty quick. So I've had my eye on this thing for years. Scott's been cruising around in it, just as a standard old thing. And I always thought it'd be a good recipient for a decent driveline. We just never knew what that actually was going to be.
Took some persuading, but you got there?
Actually, it didn't take much persuading. I just said, I'm going to put this engine in it. And he said, okay.
Yeah, sure. Scott's a good dude.
So here we are.
Many more people like Scott in the world.
No, well, we've got a fair few mates that just say, let's do this, and they say okay, so
yeah.
we can't complain.
So what does a person like Scott have to do with a person like you? How do you know Scott?
I've known him since I was a little kid, and we've always been mates. And I don't know, he's into surfing and snowboarding, and he's a chippy, and I'm not into those things, and I'm a mechanic, but that doesn't mean we can't be good mates.
True that.
So we still are. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
So he's had this car for a long time, and I've always had my eye on it because I knew we'd do something with it one day.
There's always room for improvement, bro.
Yeah, especially when you've got a red motor and a Trimatic. When you go around a roundabout, it flares the trans because it's leaked out on the ground.
And it's got like oil pressure gauges. Is that oil pressure?
Yeah, it's actually got a fancy dash in it, like a Premier dash. So I think that sort of stuff was optional back in the day.
Yeah.
Some of them just have a light to tell you when the engine's already melted to the ground. This one's got a gauge to tell you that it's almost melting to the ground. And it's also got an oil pressure gauge, which is bloody, it's like a sports car.
You can retain all that stuff, obviously.
Yeah, yep.
Column shift still.
Yeah, that's a thing. All of my mates have column shift cars, and they all want to keep it just because they know how hard it is to actually hook that up to a different trans. But I'm not complaining because no one listens. So that's the history on this fine automobile.
You are struggling turning corners there, aren't you?
Yeah, it's a. I don't know. You got to acclimatise yourself a bit. We're gonna go grab a lemon squash at the surf club and enjoy the view here.
Nah, surf club's closed. They have to go somewhere else.
Oh,
Morshka.
it's not very
Look at this, 2 parks right here,
convenient.
man. Perfect.
Oh, we can go to Scott's Brothers Bar. It's right there.
Oh, we can do
We
that.
probably
yeah.
should do that.
Marble bar, done.
He's not there.
Then back to the shed and
And then
rip
we'll
it out.
head back to the shed and put the engine on Gumtree. The red motor and the Trimatic is no longer in the engine bay, which is a good thing. It's a pretty slimy looking old cluttery thing. Did the job for years, I guess, so I'll give it a bit of credit, but we're going to make way for something better. I did film a little bit of taking it out, but at the end of the day, it's not that interesting, and we've already went through the red motor removal process in the Bedford video. It actually had exactly the same engine and gearbox as this car in it, which is kind of strange since one was from England and the other one was from Australia, but looks like an American car. Woody hasn't been around, so I had to film it myself. He was off picking macadamia nuts. I don't know why, but he does things like that. So we're nearly ready for the 304 to go in. And I almost said the iron line there, and I was so annoyed. Curse you and your buzzwords, Woody. So we get the engine bay's all cleaned out, ready to go. We give it a gurney off. It's actually pretty clean, this thing, even though it's got patina on it now. I'd probably class this as a survivor. It has been really well looked after over the years and garaged the whole time. And it used to be very clean, but the salt air's sort of got at it a bit now. So it's a bit more patinary, but the actual chassis and everything else is quite clean because it's never been modified, so it hasn't had guys bashing away at it and pulling engines in and out every weekend. Hasn't had the weight of a 308 with iron heads in it or a 350 Chev, so the chassis hasn't sagged and cracked like a lot of them do. They get a lot of cracking issues around the suspension areas. also from being driven hard on rough roads over the years. These cars were just base family vehicles way back before everyone in Australia drove around in a four-wheel drive. This is what we used to use. My parents had one of these when I was a kid. We used to sleep in the back of it while they drove and get inhale exhaust fumes through the tailgate. And there was hardly any bitumen roads around where we came from, so they just got belted through potholes and into ditches and that sort of thing. So a lot of them took a toll on a lot of them. And this is a massive high production vehicle in Australia, and there is still a lot of them left, but nowhere near the amount that they actually built. So for it to be this old and still in this condition is pretty good, and that's why it's here, because it's worth it. So we're going to do a couple of little things extra to the iron line before we throw it in. We're still waiting on a torque converter. We had to change the torque converter because the cam we put in was probably a little bit big for the converter that Pete spec'd us, and he said, I'd prefer you to have a different one. So while we're over in Arizona, they built one for us, and it should be here today, but we're still waiting. But that doesn't matter because we're going to put the engine in first and then put the transmission in, because it's just easier to do it that way. You don't have to take the bonnet or anything off, just to bring the engine over and slip it in. I've got a gearbox jack, easy to put the transmission in that way as well, so that's the way I prefer to do it. There's a fair bit of space in this engine bay. Having done a lot of Kingswood stuff lately, I don't know why, but apparently I'm the Kingswood go-to guy now. I've been LSing and all sorts of things to this chassis. I've kind of worked my way around them pretty well now, so I've got a pretty good plan of attack for the various systems that we've got to add to it. So I think we'll get it done pretty quick. Probably the biggest thing will be fuel system and the differential, which we have to actually build. We've already got a diff built, as in the housing's been modified to fit in this car, but we have to actually put new gears and bearings and a center from Harrop in it. We've got new axles, and we've got to put brakes and everything on it. So we've got to do a full diff build, which is something I don't think we've done before, so that should be interesting. Let's go over and finish off that Iron Lion. I got stuck into the wiring loom. I didn't film it, and I've already been yelled at for that. You've seen me wire stuff before. I'll give you a bit of an overview of it anyway. This is a relatively simple wiring loom, which is good because it's an old car, and the simpler the better really with the wiring, so it's not as obvious. The ECU is a 950 Haltech Elite. So this is basically built exactly for this purpose. It's for V8 engines, simplified. It's 8 injector, 4 ignition. So if you can run multi-coils, you just have to pair the outputs and run waste spark. We're not doing that in this case because we have got a distributor still. So coil-wise, I've used IGN1A Haltech coil. So it's like a super high-powered smart coil. So it's kind of like a LS1 coil on steroids. That will be more than enough for this engine. Comes with a fuse box. It's got I've added fuses and relays in there for thermofan and also starter motor, which is normally controlled by some sort of ancient switch underneath the shifter and the column. I don't want to put the load this starter motor is going to need through that, so we add a relay to unload that circuit. So the relay does the work. All it does is signal it now. That's always a good idea on an older car. When your switching wears out, you use relays to unload the switches. This is the vehicle connections. So that's in the middle of the firewall. It's obviously longer than it needs to be. We've got the power supplies, which are going to go onto a stud mount on the firewall that will then branch off to all the other power systems. And the rest of it's just ignition switch, temperature gauge, oil pressure switch, all that stuff's still there because this particular car it's a deluxe model, so it's actually got a fuel gauge, an oil gauge, and a temperature gauge. they didn't all have that. Sometimes they just had a light to tell you when the engine was already overheated. So because it's got those and they work still, I'm gonna reuse them. Again, we're just trying to keep it simple. It's not meant to be a high-tech race car with lots of dials and stuff all over. It's just meant to be a cool cruiser. That's the transmission connection. The Turbo 700 is internally wired, so if you just power up one pin on this connector, it will just go into converter lockup whenever it's in fourth gear, which is fine for this application. If you want to choose when you can put it in and out of fourth gear, out of lockup, you can switch this, but we don't really need that. If it's in fourth, it can be in lockup because it'll be cruising. That's just going to the fuel pump. Starter motor, extractor's right next to it. Got a bit of sheath over the top of it, stop the wires melting. Easy, simple stuff. Usually wiring problems are not crimped properly, not crimped at all, not soldered, melted. That'll be my biggest picks for what happens to wires. So if you know it's going to be near a heat source, just put some protection over it. Every factory vehicle that's wired has things like this on it. If you looked closely, it doesn't make any difference whether it's a brand new car or an old thing like this that we're modifying ourselves. They're always going to protect the wiring if it's near a heat source. So it's pretty simple stuff. 8 injectors, it is sequential. The 950 is capable of it, so no reason not to. Up this end we've got TPS, water and air temperature, and an idle control motor on our Mustang throttle body. That's the alternator, and there's also oil and water to the dash. So I've integrated that all in there so we don't have multiple wiring looms sort of trailing around the place. More injectors over this side, and that's just thermo fans. So I've pre-wired for them. Once it's in the car and we know where the fans are in relation to the engine, we will finish that off. So that's all good. Engine-wise, what we've still got to do is we've got to change the injectors, and we didn't have them at the time when we put the engine together. These injectors aren't very big at all. They're only like 200 cc or something, way too small for even mild upgrades. So we got them to Golby, and I said, give us some 42-pound injectors or something like that, some common replacement for these. He said, they're more expensive than 650s, or 60-pound. So we got a set of 60-pound injectors for it. So these are just Bosch, pretty generic sort of Bosch injector. They're 650cc or 60-pound or something around that size. Golby buys like thousands of these at a time, and they actually have their own injector tester, and he manually tests every injector and groups them in tolerances of flow rate. So when you buy 8 of them, they're all flowing very close to the same amount. So obviously there is a lot of intolerance with them from manufacturing. So someone's got to do this, and it's a good thing. It doesn't matter if they're only 640 cc's each. It matters that they're all the same, and that's the big thing. So all their injectors are done like that. So we've got a match set. We've got some extenders because they're only half length, maybe 3/4. And these are old school nugget things that are full length.
Did he send any O-ring lube with us this time?
He didn't, but I've got some.
Okay.
I think he used it all when he was checking out one of his new Corollas.
Oh, yeah, true that.
So we're going to whip this rail back off. I just put the rail on just to stop rats
Schmutz.
living in there while we weren't here. So let's whip it back off.
Bit tight.
I've been in there a while. There's the old nugget injector that was in it, still a Bosch, full length. You can see these must be 3/4. So we got the extender. There's extenders for 3/4 and half length, whatever you need.
Do you want to get some half-length injectors to show people what they look like?
They're like that but shorter. It appears that solenoid technology's come a long way. So we've removed the stock regulator because we're going to use a GFB reg, and this is the inlet fitting. So the 14mm O-ring with a sort of a bolt-on setup, which is kind of a pain. You could get 2 of those, but that's something you've got to track down. So instead we've just tapped it out to 3/8 NPT, and we're just going to screw some AN fittings in there to have dual inlets to the rail, or one in, one out, whichever we choose to do. Not really sure what we're going to do with that yet. So these are ready to go back in now once we give them a clean out. We've got one AN fitting in it. They ran out at the local shop, so I've ordered another one. Shouldn't be too hard to put in afterwards.
Maybe we should make our own AN fittings so that we don't have this problem.
Yeah, I'm just going to buy a CNC machine and make my own AN fittings.
Can you?
No.
If that's the iron line, Alan, then what's Rumby?
Rumby is the Iron Lion Hunter.
Rumby. Hey.
Although he's not all that keen at the moment because there's a thunderstorm, and you know how much dogs love thunderstorms.
So our injectors are in, and now we are, as Alan said, just going to mount the radiator first. So this radiator is from a WB Statesman, is that right, Al?
That is correct.
These things come with, the 6-cylinder's got quite a small radiator, the V8's had a bigger radiator, and this is bigger again, yeah?
Yes, it certainly is.
But it needs to be mounted. There's mounts on the side here, and there's pins on the bottom of the radiator too, so. You good? Got your measurement?
Yep.
What you got?
I got nothing. The bottom saddle's tacked in there, and I'm just working on figuring out how to hold the top through these pins here. It doesn't really need anything crazy. It's only meant to sit on rubber, so it has a bit of movement and doesn't get fatigued by bolting it solid. So what we think we're going to do is just drill and tap 2 holes there, 6mm, and they'll just go like that, and you can access them from the inside here. So we'll have those rubber mounts on it. So you'll just put them on and pull the radiator back, and then screw the 2 bolts in. Got our 2 brackets made. Rubbers fitted to them, they just go on there like that, and we're going to have some bolts coming through from the other side. So Woody's made a couple of centre punch studs to just wind in there so we can hold it like this and give it a tap and mark the 2 holes that we've got to drill. Something like that. Finished our top mounts, they fit. So I'm just going to MIG up these bottom mounts onto the radiator support, and then we can throw the radiator in, or not, because we're going to put the engine in.
Nothing says safety like a seatbelt. Fresh. Look at that. Get on the gram. Instagram ready, SEMA ready. Done. How good does that look, eh? That is so sick. I'm glad these weren't painted because now you can, it actually looks so much better.
It accentuates the resplendent black wrinkle paint.
Sure does.
That's it. The Iron Lion is in its cage, or engine bay as it were. It's looking resplendent in wrinkle black, and I think it must be time for a lemon squash.
I think it's about time for a iron brew.
An urn, what? What's this?
Iron brew. Scotland's local lemon squash. Gosh, that's cold, man. Your fridge is a negative.
Brewed in Scotland since 1901.
Thanks to Andrew Dodds for sending us this. We've got a little package in the PO box. Have you had this before?
No.
Pretty good, I like it. It's different, but it's nice.
Oh,
Shout out to Johnny, who I used to work with. He used to bring slabs of these into work.
all the sugar.
I like them, I reckon they're sweet.
Tastes like something else, but I don't know what.
It's like halfway between a Fanta and like a Dr.
Yeah.
Pepper or some shit.
That's it.
So the engine's fitted. This is pretty much live week by week at the moment. We're fresh back from the States and we've gotten stuck straight into this thing. So it's going to be a kind of a bit of a week by week thing, just like the Bedford. So it's just about pretty much live is where we're up to. Keep up to date with our social medias to see Instagram stories, Facebook photos and everything of this thing progressing. And also you can kind of keep up to date with when we're posting videos. We've posted a few midweek videos here and there too. So we're not always posting on the day every week. There's kind of come the weekend, or depending on where you are in the world, there's always different days. I got stuck with that in the States. You got to post a day earlier. Ask me how I know. Whoops.
Silly dateline.
Silly dateline.
We wouldn't have these problems if the Earth was actually flat.
Don't get stuck into that, dude. That's a whole YouTube roll of comments there. So stay tuned for next week. We've got our Hughes Turbo 700 getting fitted, along with our new store converter. That was cool to see that being, we'll see it apart in the States actually. That was cool. I like that.
We might have a companion show to throw up
We do.
of torque converters or something.
Maybe.
Anyway.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time.
Don't you have somewhere to be?
I do have somewhere to be. I'm going roll racing in the Bedford with Millsy. We're going to race a Lamborghini. Check Facebook for that video, actually.
R.I.P.
See ya. What are you doing?
Golbies.
No, what about it? I like Gobies.
He's alright.
He's alright.
Not very friendly.
He's a bit shy sometimes.
He's too busy trying to buy Corollas. Old ones. Station wagon versions.
Should call him Herbert.
Herbert. Maybe that's who that parts guy was.
Maybe it was.
It all makes sense.